this last example of Day for Night, we will once again work with a scene that was not shot specifically for a Day for Night. Lucky is that the setting and the situation, so the brick wall of the alley, the neatly cut and controlled lighting, can allow us to work out a Day for Night for this shot. We will play a lot with some elements typical of the language of the Day for Night, and we will play a lot with the use of blue so to push our scene towards a strongly forced Day for Night. The very first step in our forced serial node is to take down the overall gamma of our scene. So, with the primary wheels, we take down the gamma. At the same time, with the curves, safeguarding the final third of our dynamic range, and working only on luminance, we create a drop of about 20% of luminance, thus strongly taking down the components of the luma and the highlights. Once we have fixed the base of our shot, we add a serial node where we perform the color shift. For the chromatic shift, we are going to push the gamma towards blue and the gain towards a not so intense shade, so more towards a cyan and in a slightly more delicate way. So we push strongly and sensibly the gamma to the right, while we push the gain a little less and lower down. The image is still very bluish and very colorful, so at this point we take down the saturation by a good 20% to bring the whole image to be slightly less saturated and therefore reduce the presence of the character's skin tone a little. At this point, let us intervene on our area of interest, as usual using a power window. We add another serial node and insert a power window, a very soft and well extended oval, which goes well with the face of a character. We create a very soft power window to select the face and partly also the hair with the fall off. Pay attention since the scene is moving for safety. Let us perform a tracking of the power window. Once tracked, the power window follows the movement and we can go to the curves and operating on the luminance, create a shoulder in the lower part of the curve. Position a control point right under the midtones and make a drop of shadows to give more drama to the character's face. Obviously, at this stage, we can go back to the previous nodes to readjust some of the elements if necessary. Like, for example, slightly changing the balance and, if we want to, push a little more the gain towards the cyan and make sure that the overall image is uniform. The reason why I keep these two nodes separate is that it simplifies the management of color change and basic correction in case you need to go back and make these kinds of changes in later stage of the work. Once increased the contrast of the character, we proceed with another serial node where we use the matte of the power window to do a background drop instead. In this case, we will work exclusively on the gain, going down significantly with its values to make the background very dark and detach the character a lot. We only use the gain to keep textures and background elements since the wall is very close. If the wall is a little too present, we can go back to the beginning and further reduce the gamma. If you perceive the highlights still too present in this section, return to the first intervention, reduce the overall gamma of the image a little more, and potentially lower further the gain of the color control. At this point the shot could be ready, but for the character's arm. It stands out a lot. It has a slight color shift to green, it still retains a bit of colors, and especially in the right part, that is now the most shaded section of our image, it remains a little too visible. So we are going to insert another serial node with an additional power window, this time very small and focused on the arm. Tight, but quite soft. Obviously, we must perform a tracking because the arm moves in the shot. But as always, with DaVinci tracking, it resolves quickly. Here we will work on the primary wheels with a significant intervention to reduce the gain, the gamma, and a little bit the lift as well. Of course, always keep an eye on the fact that these elements do not overlap and clamp the information. In this way, we reinforce the shadows. We might as well reduce the saturation further in this part of the image to get a very dramatic shot, very much in the style of bluish night shots and of strong visual impact.
Il pregio di questa struttura è che, come dicevo, posso sempre andare a modificare i miei bilanciamenti in qualsiasi momento per correggere in funzione di possibili richieste del mio cliente. E abbiamo trasformato con un mood facilmente modificabile uno shot finalmente diurno in uno shot fortemente notturno.